Hello, everyone in the community. I am very, very excited for today's live podcast and AMA with Mike Stevenson. For those of you who this is the first one you're joining, this is the opportunity to ask Mike any questions that are top of mind as it relates to sales career advice, scaling with companies, moving up in your career across IC and managerial roles across SDR and AE. So we'll cover a lot of topics, but first, I'm going to do a quick intro to Mike. So background with nearly 2 decades of sales experience from SMB to enterprise. Mike's led both full sales cycle account executives and SDR teams, and he currently leads DocuSign's majors team in the evolution of DocuSign from the world-leading e-signature product, which was more of a point solution, to now a platform sales motion with their intelligent agreement management solution. So, Mike, anything I missed from your intro?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, Alexa. I'm excited to be here. Excited to chat sales. It's my biggest passion. What I do with the majority of my life, and to talk sales, sales leadership, SDR, AE, both in North America and in EMEA. So excited to share some of what I've picked up over the years.
Amazing. Thank you. So maybe we'll start out and tell me a little bit about your background and role at DocuSign because we were talking about this earlier. You've been there for a while. So I want to hear more about kind of the journey, how you got there and how you grew throughout the career.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm coming up on 11 years in tech. That is kind of the equivalent of the 35-year career at this point with a single entity, single company. It doesn't feel that way though. I've been with DocuSign through a lot of changes, both as a company, but then if you think about the macroeconomic climate and the way that SaaS was perceived and what some of the opportunities and challenges were in 2014 versus today, it's night and day. They're just totally different environments. And that was really the point at which I joined was, I think, a real acceleration for SaaS in general. And when I came to DocuSign, I said, you know what? I think this is going to be kind of like a visa. It'll be really good at doing one thing, but doing it everywhere. And so I want to be, employee 801 instead of employee 8001. And that, now is effectively true, right? We're pretty prolific across the e-signature space, with over 70% market share, but it wasn't always that way. 11 years ago, our most frequent objection was, is this even legal? It's just kind of funny to think back on now, right? Because, back then we would say, oh, well, the IRS and Bank of America are customers. And so that gave people a lot of comfort. But the opportunities and challenges that we're dealing with today are quite different. Right now, my role, I run our majors geo organization. And so that means we have customers across a variety of different industries utilizing electronic signature in any capacity, from procurement to maybe it's a customer facing use case, legal, HR, sales, and understanding and conceptualizing the value proposition that it offers in each one of these instances today is always challenging because it's just so nuanced in all the different ways that you can use DocuSign. But we're in the process of an evolution as an organization, as a lot of SaaS companies are, and leveraging AI to bring increased value to our customer base. And I think DocuSign is uniquely positioned for that because we're the holding ground for the world's agreements and contracts. So it gives us a natural starting point for the conversation to say, well, what's going on with those? What's the value that you're driving from potentially kind of static documents today? And so that's what's really exciting me and my day-to-day today is having those conversations with our customers and also candidly evolving our sales organization to meet that moment. This is a different type of motion than we've been used to in what's required to drive us to success.
That's one of the things I didn't send you as a prep question. What does it take to do that evolution from maybe more of a point solution product to more of this kind of platform play?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces and components. We were more easily able to land and then expand in our prior e-signature motion. So a common way that a sales process would run is we'd find a need with a revenue generating part of the business, particularly like, let's say, sales. We would build value on that use case and get the sales team bought in and sell DocuSign really for that specific use case. And what would happen is other parts of the organization would pick up on it. It would expand into different groups like HR would say, "Hey, you know what? We should be doing offer letters this way as well." And so there was a natural evolution in the way that we expanded across organizations. But today, as we have evolved to being a platform organization, we now need our customer who is using us in sales, HR, procurement, and legal. We need each of those departments to buy in and see the value of migrating to the intelligent agreement management platform. So it's an increased level of multi-threading, which means we got to go wide across organizations. Once you go wide, you also need to go high. So we're also you getting out of department sales cycles and more to enterprise sales cycles. But then you also got to kind of bounce back down to understand what the true problem set is and be able to communicate it back up to executives. So that's a whole different motion in terms of just the people and the different groups that we're engaging with for one deal. And it's part of why this year we've moved to having fewer accounts per AE to free up capacity to be able to go wide, high, up, and down.
And how did you evolve it seems like you would need different or very much so coached sellers throughout that journey because it's very different. So how do you manage that transition?
Well, we're still in the process. So intelligent group investment it rolled out a year ago. We do have about 10,000 customers already. So it's really an exciting time because it's resonating with customers. But we're building the plane as we fly it, and that's part of what's both fun and challenging because we have a current quarter number to hit and a next quarter number to hit. But along the way, we have to keep evolving our process. And so it's in part, taking a moment to get out of the field and do some enablement and a deep dive. And then also follow up on that throughout the quarter and, the subsequent year. And we're doing that actually in August. We're going to land the plane. We're going to take everybody kind of out of the field for a couple days. And we're going to refresh on what we did back in I think it was March for our global kickoff when we initially set that vision. So it's repetition. It's talking about the same thing over and over again and reiterating and reinforcing what we know is really key and critical to the transformation.
Amazing. I'm going to switch actually a little bit from DocuSign's evolution to your evolution. So how you've scaled. So a lot of people in tech, which I'm sure a lot of people listening in now I don't know the exact average time, but people are hopping around jobs every 1, 2, or 3 years. And a lot of people say, when you join a startup, it's really hard to scale yourself to get to the next phase of growth. And then it's hard to scale yourself to get to the next stage of growth. And it's very uncommon for someone to last in a company scaling really quickly over 11 years. How did you scale yourself along this journey to really be able to be successful and have impact in the company at each stage, which it probably felt like a different inflection point in a different company every few years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said it really well there is it is a different company every few years. And so it's never felt like I've been at one company. Was in different offices. So I did 3 or 4 years in our Seattle office. I was running our inbound sales dev team. Then I popped over to Dublin, Ireland, our EMEA office for 2.5 years, ran inbound, outbound there, and then came back to the US and got back into running sales teams. I was running our financial services organization and then now in our majors geos group. So part of it's role and location evolution, but embedded across the entire journey has been also just different needs from a company perspective. 2014, we needed to grow up, trying to prepare for an IPO. We needed to be a replicable engine for the organization and deliver replicable revenue. And that a predictable revenue, that was something that the SDR and outbound teams can really control, right? We're the pipeline engine. And if we can make tweaks that are going to generate a better output, each one of those tweaks can have a significant impact down at the end of that closed won journey. And so a big part of what we were doing early on is just building the framework and the structure. And I had to adapt to that. I came from an organization before DocuSign that was B2B telecom sales. I was going door to door and selling T1 lines, 1.5 megabits upload and download. I didn't have to build anything. I just had to listen to what other folks told me to do and do it really effectively. But each one of these moments with DocuSign has required some kind of personal evolution. And so coming into the team initially, it was about how do I evolve to meet this moment? I need to build process. I have to build a an ROI, a standard operating procedure. I have to build sequences, understand what the conversion rates are today so that we can make tiny tweaks and improve them tomorrow. But then when I went over to EMEA, it was a totally different beast. It was again, rapidly scaling organization that had to scale in multiple countries and do it simultaneously, which, when we, from the US perspective, I think we maybe underrepresent the challenge that is because each one of these countries has a very different culture and the way that they go to market. Typically in doc, it's a little bit more of a partner type of motion. In UKI, it's closer matched to maybe the US, but there's higher infosec security requirements, maybe a little less of an initial trust in technology. And in the Benelux, it was challenging to find folks that were going to be able to speak the language to serve that market. Each market had its own individual challenge, and it was a bit like whack-a-mole as you're trying to scale across this entire continent. And then coming back to the US, that's been really the initial point of our journey, sort of post COVID, as we've gone through this process of reinvention. And how do we continue to change our motion, how we resonate with customers? And each one of those times has meant that I've had to change, I've had to evolve to meet that situation. So it's always felt like a different company. And I think the key thing in each one of these roles has just been total adaptability. What does this moment need? And how can I deliver it so we get to that end result? And the last thing I would say is it's a lot of like, leave your ego at the door and find out what this situation needs for you, but also for the people around you that you're there to lead and support and help drive to an outcome.
It, I love that phrase of leaving ego at the door. I'm curious, when you say that does it mean, like, when you're trying new things, it's okay to not be familiar with it and kind of just, like, learn as you go and fail a few times before you get it right? Or does it mean leaning on your peers who maybe have done this before where you haven't? Tell me a little bit more about what that means.
I think it means all those things. I mean, consistently, we'll be in a deal review, for example, and I'll provide feedback on how I think we should be running the deal cycle and some of the things that I think need to change. And there are certainly some instances where I feel very strongly, and it's going to take a lot to convince me otherwise. But more often than not, it's a conversation, and it's a conversation at all levels from SDR all the way up to our GVP. Is this the right way to run the situation? Is this the right way to be thinking about it? Because inevitably, we're all looking to get to the same outcome. We want to, build value for our customers and achieve revenue targets. So if we're all aligned on the same objective, the more opinions that you can get, then the better equipped you are to really tackle that situation. And candidly, a lot of what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis is all net new. It's, sales is evolving at such a rapid rate, both as a profession and a skill set, but then also as, that's evolving to meet the way that our customers want to be sold to or they want to buy. So both, that buyer seller journey is evolving so rapidly that you need constant iteration and feedback through multiple parties who have different viewpoints on maybe how a situation has been run in the past and what worked or didn't. And so I think constantly asking questions of people all around you to understand, am I on the right track? Are we on the right track? Is a really key part of rapid iteration and evolution.
I'd like to switch gears a bit and go back to your days when you were an SDR and you were, hoping to get promoted to an AE. Maybe there's some SDRs on the line. What do you think you learned as an SDR that helped you get promoted to AE? And what's your advice to maybe other SDRs on this path?
Yeah, I think the secrets are not all that secret in that they are they're pretty age old. There are not really shortcuts. There is just one way, and it's hard work, it's commitment, it's pushing through tough conversations, and you do all that, you get past a lot of the things that might seem like hurdles, but really are just part of your growth. It might seem as though you're hitting a wall in a week or a month, But by constantly pushing yourself and giving yourself time to grow, you'll meet the moment. And that's, I think, really key. Like I deal with this. I have 2 daughters, they're 5 and 1, and I think about sometimes how a day when you are a little kid it's like the equivalent of a month as an adult. As we get older, it just feels, a month will fly by. Oh, yeah, what happened to June? But as a kid, that day at camp is so long because you've never been to camp. And it's the same idea as an SDR. Your week can feel so long because it's kind of early days. It's the first time you've been in this position and role. Every month feels like years. But in hindsight, when you look back on it, it's going to be just this sliver of your career where you really hope that you committed to the values that are going to drive your success long term, which is, work ethic, growing consistently and constantly, and delivering for your company and your customers in a way where you can look back when you're 80 and go, I'm really proud of the way that I tackled that moment.
Yep. I appreciate that perspective, and it all comes down to kind of like persistence and grit and not giving up. Something you mentioned was being an AE and being an SDR, one is more art and one is more science. Um, and you kind of have to learn both to be successful ultimately in your sales career. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of art and science. So the science, I think, when you're an SDR is very much about there's some number equation that you can use to drive to a specific outcome, and you can tweak your sequences, and you can tweak the cadence and the timing. Maybe people are going to pick up the phones more on Thursdays, for example. To me, that's science, right? Like let's use metrics and numbers to figure out the exact equation to maximize our output. Now, it doesn't mean that when you get on the phone, you are listening and hearing, okay, this person's having a rough day. How do I meet this moment? That's sort of the art, right? You're always going to have to adapt to what's going to be important for that situation. But there's a bit more indexed on the science. If you consistently, are calling your customers, multi-threading, having conversations, you're likely to achieve that output, more likely. And then as you move and become more up market of a seller, there's increasingly a lot of opaqueness to the people that you're selling to. I mean, these are massive organizations like that, tens and hundreds of thousands of people. And so you're trying to put together a story about what's happening, both at the organizational level. Here are their key initiatives and strategic objectives, but then also here are the politics associated with this person. They want to get promoted into this role. Does this help them achieve that? Is this a risk to them achieving that? How would they perceive this situation? And a lot of that is just, it's art. It's trying to get into somebody's mindset and empathize with who they are, where they are, and how they achieve their personal objectives. Because of course, you have organizational objectives, you have departmental objectives, but then you have individuals that you're really working with on a daily basis. And that's, I think, really where that art comes from. How good are you at listening to people, both what they're saying, what they're not saying, what they post on LinkedIn? What does all that say about who they are as an individual, and how your solution can meet that moment for them, their department, and their organization?
Mm. Something I would like to similar question, but a bit different, and it was actually also written in the chat. Now we talked about SDRs going to AEs. Can you talk about the struggles that maybe had to overcome or see others in order to move into a managerial position?
Yeah. Yeah. I see this question too. Thanks, David. So the question about remote hybrid, I think, is super valid too. But let me tackle the first part, which is, ICs moving into the managerial role. I think a lot of times, like a really solid IC will want to move into being a manager, as a next step. They know they've done their job extremely well, and they, want to influence that beyond what they're doing on a daily basis. If they're coming at that from a purely coaching perspective, like that's where they get their joy, that's the reward, then that's coming from a really good altruistic place. The outcome is likely to be really positive. I think what folks realize when they get into a role as a manager is you think, okay, well, I didn't want to do that training last week, and my manager told me that I had to, and so I did. I feel like I don't have control over my day to day. If I become a manager, then I will have more control. I'll be the one telling people to do that training or, that, send me that call so I can review. The reality is a manager doesn't always have that control. If anything, you lose a lot of control because you're now at the mercy of the production of 6 to 10 account executives, and they're going to be exercising their role in a way where you're only a part of a very small portion of it. So you're very reliant on them to go out and be successful. So I think that challenge and the understanding that you're not Michael Jordan, you're Steve Kerr. You are the coach. You are the one empowering folks to do really well. Or the other example, and I live in the Bay Area, so this is the Warriors example, but Steve Kerr is the coach of the Warriors, and he is constantly coaching, the top players. And when he does that, it's not about, you know, always giving them great advice about here's where you need to go on the court, but the confidence that he's trying to give them. And you think about these NBA players like Steph Curry, you think, okay, they must have all that confidence. He's just trying to give confidence for this person to go out and do their job really well. And that's a lot of what being a manager can be is how do you really coach somebody for that moment to be successful. But I think it is acutely challenging in the remote hybrid area. So I'm glad David brought that up because I remember this point in COVID when someone said in a survey, if I have to join another virtual happy hour, I cannot. I cannot do another virtual happy hour. And I thought, you're totally right. And I'm kind of tired of throwing virtual happy hours. But how do we get together? Like, how do we build culture? And to David's point, it is a lot more challenging in the remote and hybrid world. I think you have a value or you have an opportunity if you're in hybrid to get together. And, a big part of culture is the personal interaction that you have. It's a lot easier to make happen in the hybrid way because you can, have a happy hour. You can, get lunch together. You can sit in the same sales pit, give each other coaching advice and tips. But remote does require you to be much more proactive. And I think candidly, getting on the phone is a huge value add. It's, we spend so much time in front of Zoom, so two-dimensional, and we feel like this is a way to connect so we can see each other. But for, 100 years, we were just picking up the phone and calling folks. And there's something nice about going on a walk and having a conversation with somebody that really helps you connect. And so there's times when we'll do walking one-to-ones just to, chat about what's on somebody's mind. And even you can get really deep into deals because you're listening a little bit better while you're away from your computer. At least I find, because I have so many things popping up between Slacks and emails, and it just feels like this is your control center. Your rocket's, live, and you've got 1,000 buttons that are being asked to be pushed. But when you're away from it, you can truly focus on listening, and it helps you, I think, connect to that individual.
It's such a good point. Covered so many topics there in terms of kind of when you should cover the path of becoming a manager versus staying in the IC role. Also, how hard it is to do this hybrid world of remote. I actually did the same thing with some of my direct reports. I'll do the phone call as well. It definitely, especially if you can walk outside, it does make you feel closer in a way to someone, which is weird than Zoom, and it helps you directly focus into the conversation, which is great. Um, I I actually would be curious. We covered this a bit, but if you could give someone just like very clear, direct advice of if they should be in senior, if they should, their career path should be to progress in the IC world and stay in AE, but maybe move up to mid market, then enterprise and strategic, or go into a managerial role, how do you direct them based on their interest or skill set?
I mean, my recommendation would be to think a few steps ahead. Where do you really want to go eventually? And if you can lay out the path as far as you can see, the whole what's your 5, 10 year plan is, it's a tough question to answer because it's also committing yourself to things like roles and responsibilities that you may not always have control over. But I think as far as your eye can see in terms of what you feel like is interesting to you, that's how you should think about what your role progression and opportunity cycle should look like. And the second thing I would say is if you don't feel like you have that picture, the more that you can build a network, and that network can be built sort of unorganically where you're reaching out to folks and saying, "Hey, would you mentor me?" Which, by the way, I think is a really important question. Specifically ask that. People like that. Um, but it can also be built organically as you're working with folks and observing what their day to day looks like and trying to figure out, based off of what I see from this person, is that kind of thing that I want to be doing? Because that's where you can get more of a picture, I think, of where you do want to go and also where you don't. So if you think about sometimes I see this with folks that maybe are an S&B and they may jump into a management role, but they haven't gotten that upmarket selling experience. And then sometimes they feel a little bit stuck. So that's where if, they knew, hey, I want to go up market eventually, maybe it's the opportunity to continue down the IC path, grow within your organization and sell to larger organizations so you can then lead people in those types of environments. And if you have exposure to people that are doing, more larger deals and bigger companies, then you can build that narrative in your own head of where you want to go.
It's such a good point, and I also have seen, many people, many AEs, I see this actually across every role, say, "I wanna become a manager," because it seems like the most next logical career progression, and a lot of AEs are hungry and they want that next milestone, and then they do that work, and it's not actually what they love doing. I mean, I see this across AEs, but I also see it a lot in engineering where there's this we kind of have formed people more junior in their career to think that, like, you should become a manager next, but that's not necessarily the should. Some people are much better at being an IC. They like it more, they get paid way more in some scenarios, especially on the AE side. So, it's interesting to see a lot of people going from, IC manager back down to IC just because it's something that aligns with their skill sets and interest.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great book too, called The Four Tendencies, by Gretchen Rubin, and it talks a little bit about where your motivations are, and that like some people are very just self motivated. If I say I want to do something, I'm going to do it. Some people are more motivated by other people's expectations of themselves, and then some people are motivated somewhere in between. And for folks that are moving into a management role, I think it is valuable to go through the exercise of what really motivates you, as an individual. Like, are you motivated by other people's expectations of you, your team's expectations of you, your bosses? Are you motivated just about what is key to your objectives? And trying to find the right middle ground of what works for you as an individual and the role there you're going to be the most successful. You're going to feel that motivation. You're going to feel the fire, the drive, the passion. I think I just can't think of another thing that I would rather be doing than what I'm doing. Like, I absolutely love what I do. I feel very fortunate to be in that situation. Part, was planned, but some part of it was happenstance. It just kind of happened that I ended up doing what I love to do. And I think if you're thinking about this as a career path, think about as much as you can, like, who are you? What are your motivations? And how do you align to those so that you're in a place where you have fire and passion about what you do on a daily basis?
I love it. Thank you so much, Mike. We are at time. I appreciate all of the real insights into what you've seen along your career, but also the DocuSign journey. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Alexa.
Talk soon.